in college football is this, that Jalen Milroe is not going to start for Alabama this week. Tyler Buchner, the Notre Dame transfer, in the driver's seat against South Florida, USF, I'm sorry. I think they and UCF have dispatched with the directional school names, which is their prerogative. They can name it whatever they want. But against USF this week, they are going to start Tyler Buchner, and a good time to do that. And I think you can see this as Nick Saban panicking. I actually don't think that Nick Saban panics, because I think that whatever is going to happen with this Alabama team this year, Nick Saban will have a good handle on it and will just drive through the storm, however that means. If that means they go 9-3, then they go 9-3. But if it's for the better of the program, if he's just going to keep it going this way, then it will. Now, we heard Tim Brando say the other day that this decision to kind of hold off on the transfer portal hurt him. Now, there were reports that Drake may turn down $2 million a year to come there.
Yes.
And I was surprised Spencer Sanders was not on their radar.
A
little bit.
I'm not, because I just have never trusted him, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I've never trusted him. And then now, like, you leave. Like, you would easily be the starter if you would have stayed put, and now you're just holding the clipboard. Like, I don't see him being a fit at Bama regardless.
Yeah, I mean, let's look around the country, transfer quarterbacks this season.
Right.
That have made an impact. Sam Hartman.
Definitely.
Right up there has made an impact.
Everybody in the Pac-12.
Yeah, but I'm talking about guys who transfer who were available to them that they could have gotten. Sam Hartman and Devin Leary. Devin Leary was the one I also thought they might go in on.
Yes.
Brennan Armstrong at NC State. You know, I think the book's still out on how that is going. But you know, so there wasn't like there's a bunch of guys that were like really, you know, like could they have gotten in on Walker Howard when he went to Ole Miss? But yeah, then they're in the same situation they're kind of in right now as a guy who hasn't played yet.
Yeah, I mean, there was really nobody else that really hit the portal. I'm trying to think, like, you think logically how things work now. If I'm Bama, I would have reached out to Malik Murphy or somebody on Texas' plethora of depth chart that they have there.
But Malik Murphy was hurt. That's the other thing. He hardly even got to play in the spring, you know, because he was still recovering. So, yeah, them not getting Sam Hartman and maybe even Devin Leary might have changed their season for the worse. They waited until the end of spring on Tyler Buchner, who I'm surprised was even there, knowing that Sam Hartman was coming, because Sam Hartman wasn't going to Notre Dame to fight for the job.
No.
But I guess, you know, they stood on ceremony there and, you know, let him fight it out and see if it was. But Sam Hartman was going to be the guy at Notre Dame, you know. So I don't know. I mean, like, that decision's big. I don't see it as panic. I see it as, one, you have to protect above all else, because Jalen Milroe is still just a sophomore.
Yes.
And he is a fantastic athlete. You want to be able to protect his confidence, which this is probably a hit to it, but not a bad a hit to it as it could be of playing 3 or 4 games in a row where you make the mistakes you made against Texas.
Well, I mean, I also think it's a situation where maybe it provides that spark of get better at with your reps in practice on throwing. Like, I don't see Tyler Buchner coming in and lighting the world on fire and being that much better or that more efficient in the passing game than what Milroe is. That's the biggest concern for me. But, like, maybe this is just a little slight spark of saying, look, you've shown right now that other than your deep ball you can't throw. Maybe it's a practice thing, or that's the only real logical tactic I can think behind this move, because, I mean, I understand testing Buchner this week, but at the same time, like, you've seen it. You know essentially what you got at the end of the day. I just don't think he's going to be that much of a difference regardless.
Yeah, and look, Tyler Buchner came to be the start. Like, you don't go and get him after the spring if you think that Jalen Milroe or Simpson or, you know, are going to be fine come August.
Yeah.
And so they obviously made that decision knowing that they needed some more help. Buchner came in after the spring. He only had August. While, you know, he follows Tommy Reeves and he knows that system, it's still Tommy Rees is having to adjust to what Nick Saban wants too.
Definitely.
So like those are the things that'll have to happen. So we'll see how Tyler Buchner does. But right now they have a bunch of guys on the roster who can't win jobs. You know, Alabama normally doesn't have to get a transfer quarterback who didn't win a job somewhere else.
That's a good point.
I will say that if you like a super big Alabama fan and you want to throw Jacob Coker at me, yes, they won a national championship with Jacob Coker. He was not beating out Jameis Winston, but his timeline would have like he would have been the starter at FSU had he waited that one more year, and then he was the starter at Alabama the next year. They won the national title. So yes, there's that one, but usually, you know, they're taking a guy out of the portal because they can, you know, but they haven't also, to my knowledge, taken a lot of quarterbacks out of the portal. I mean, they've been really successful, you know, outside of Jacob Coker with Brody Croyle, AJ McCarron, Greg McElroy, Mac Jones, Sims, like all those guys really successful for them. Jalen Hurts, they lost one. They lost Jalen Hurts, obviously, to Oklahoma. But Jalen Hurts, like all those guys, Bryce Young now, they've been successful with that. This is a little bit of a new territory for them, especially in the last decade, where they're having to go and look at quarterback. But I do think that when you've got an athlete as talented as Jalen Milroe, to me, it's way more important that you find the best way for him to be successful without crushing him into dust confidence-wise and making it to where he's not going to be able to start from you at quarterback no matter what, because you've put him in a position where he's not ready to help you, or also you're not necessarily ready to run the offense that Jalen Milroe would be good at, because they were not doing that against Texas last week.
No, and I also wonder, like, how much of this is finally seeing the constant turnover from an offensive coordinator standpoint at Bama catch up with them on the recruiting trail. Like, if you're constantly going through guys year in and year out, it seems like it's finally gotten to a point where it's more difficult for them to recruit. I mean, I know maybe this was a year where you try to take maybe you thought you were going to get Drake May, so you didn't put more of an emphasis on the recruiting class this year. But I also wonder how much of that really is. Like, you're in a situation where if you're Bama, you should never be concerned about your quarterback. Like, you should think you would always get a top-notch guy in there like Georgia's been able to do, or Ohio State, you know, and that's just one of those things where that hasn't happened this year. And I don't know if that's just a weird situation where your system and the turnover is catching up for you, or you put all your eggs in one basket and missed in the transfer portal significantly, and now you're set back a year or two.
Yeah, look, and Tim Brando said the other day that he thinks that Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban's stubbornness on
pretty similar
issue might cost them. You know, look, it's early in the year, and Alabama's only lost one game. If you want to tell me that somebody who can pick themselves off the mat, Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban can pick themselves off the mat.
Yes.
But from what we've seen of what they have, and this is even going back to last year where Alabama, you know, they played a lot more close games than they normally played, and they played sloppy at times. And Jalen Milroe won him a game against A&M. He played pretty well in that game. And a lot of that was A&M also Jimboing their way out of that
exactly.
one. But they were not Alabama of old, where, especially in some of the close games that they won, it was the Bryce Young factor that was the difference. That, yes, you have the first pick in the draft, and he's better than everybody else, so let's ride that. Well, they don't have that now, so that's going to hurt them in the close games. Like Texas should have been a little bit closer. In my mind, going into that game, if it's this Texas on the rise in classic Alabama, even if Texas wins, it should not be Nick Saban, you know, talking about next week on the headset in the last 4 minutes of the game, you know?
No, but I also think it was one of those where they tried to play, because that game, it looked like they were trying to me, watching Bama's often, you know, in the SEC as I have, like, they looked like they were trying to play that vintage Alabama football and beat you with the talent despite the quarterback. And I think that's where they finally realized that everybody who left out of the transfer portal has hindered them, and they're not able to do that the way they used to because they just don't have the body stacked up in the depth of 5-star after 5-star like they were able to because now, like you mentioned the other day, everybody's hit the portal, and they're instead of waiting and developing, they're off playing somewhere. So I think that's kind of caught up with them, and they just don't have an ace in the hole against these programs like they have in years past.
No, absolutely not. They don't. And look, everybody, like, people suffer. Look, I'll tell you, Texas fans can attest to this a little bit, maybe a lot of it, is that eventually everybody starts hiring coaches to beat you.
Exactly.
And so the SEC has started hiring coaches to beat them, and they finally have one that can beat them. And they have a couple others that can take enough recruits away from him to where he's not as strong. So, look, LSU was always kind of recruiting with them. They always seemed to whiff on quarterback until they fell ass backwards into Joe Burrow being available and and had one of the greatest teams ever. I would say that 2019 LSU team, the only team in my mind I would pick for sure to beat it would be 0-1 Miami.
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
but they're better at quarterback than 0-1 Miami is, and that I would take Joe Burrow over Ken Dorsey. But everywhere else, I don't know. So,
man, but that's secondary.
If Joe Burrow is throwing to that secondary,
that's a little different.
Yeah, it's a little different. But they had that great team, so they had a roster that was as loaded as you could get.
Yes,
there are teams like matchups. Like, I would love to do just a bracket of not even necessarily a bracket, but just like 05 Texas versus 2019. LSU, 0-1 Miami versus 95 Nebraska, 2013 FSU versus, I'm trying to think of somebody who's kind of on that level. Probably, one
of them Ohio State teams.
Ohio State, like 2014 Ohio State. Well, the next, they could have played each other, FSU won kind of, but the FSU, if the FSU team year before and the 2014 Ohio State team had played, that would have been really interesting, that game right there. But that's a little tangent. But you hire coaches to beat you. So when Texas won, it was a bigger alarm bell than when Oklahoma won, right?
Yes.
So when Oklahoma won in 2000, that wasn't really that much of an alarm bell to the Big 12. But when Texas won again, after they had spent the better part of 2.5 decades being good but not great, or sometimes even flat out mediocre, when Texas won in 05, that set off alarm bells around the Big 12. So then everybody's making moves to try to beat Texas until eventually they did, right?
Yeah.
And then Texas just could never find the right, coach to rekindle the glory, between Mac Brown and now Steve Sarkisian. So what's happened in the SEC is, and because they've sustained way more success, is that every move that's made, which now will be to beat Kirby Smart probably, but even then you're still kind of beating Nick Saban. Every move that's been made coaching-wise is to beat Nick Saban. Who can beat Nick Saban? Who can we have that can regularly beat Nick Saban? And there's not really a strong answer to that yet, except for Kirby Smart, who was the next model, the new model Nick Saban.
Yeah, I honestly thought it would have been, like Jimbo. I thought he would have been able to take that mold and have the run with it, because you've had all those coaches. Like Nick Saban has spawned off all of these phenomenal coaches, and they're doing exactly what they were taught at these certain programs, and it's starting to come up and bite him, man. But I thought it would probably been Jimbo beforehand when it was Kirby that did it, and then probably Lane. But see how Lane is kind of flatlined. It's like he's reached his peak at Ole Miss. But to see what Sark is doing and how he's building it, I'm surprised that Sark is starting to have that trajectory of being like that next guy up behind Kirby Smart that's trying to catch Saban. But yeah, I'm really intrigued by Ole Miss and how Lane Kiffin is kind of stalled out there, because he's one of those really brilliant minds as well, coming from Saban's tree, that just hasn't found the right program yet to get it to where he can compete year in and year out and push Saban.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what's happening, and they've got little bitty things.
Yeah.
And I've done this as